know a lot about it. They are Dr. Vivian Seltzer and Bruce Miller. She is a clinical psychologist. He's a child psychologist. And Jim O'Brien's here because he ran the series all last week asking that question, are you a good parent? And Jim asks some more questions now.
I got to tell you, Mark, I guess that's the big question right there. Are you? If you are one, are you a good one? It seems like as we have done the research that we've done for the series, as we continue to read various articles about this, and there has been an influx of them to Action News all week long as we got into this series, is there seems to be one basic question which comes up again and again. So I'll throw it out to both of you, and one of you grab it and run. Probably Vivian, since we're all prone to let the ladies go first these days. Women's lib notwithstanding. Where do you go to learn to be a parent at all? Whether you want to call it a good parent, an average parent, or even any kind of parenting. Where do you learn that? Where does that come from? Is there a place to go?
Well, I think you're bringing up a very, very important question, and that is the fact that we are taught to do practically everything. But the areas that we're not taught in is how to be a husband or good husband or good wife, or how to be a good parent. And it is not something that comes naturally. It's not something that comes spontaneously. Much of the feeling for children is spontaneous. Your love for children, your desire to help them grow and develop to the best of their potential. But there are certain areas of knowledge that you need to be helped to learn. Certainly, the nursery school programs that are now available do have parent education series connected with them. Many of our social agencies in the city also have parent education seminars. Schools increasingly, through their PTAs, are moving in the direction of trying to help parents understand themselves and understand their children. I could go on and on with more specific areas, but in general, I think what we need to know is that this area needs to be developed. We need more work on this. Parents need not to feel so frustrated at not having all the answers, because it is very complicated to be a good parent.
Bruce, I want your response too, along those same lines, with an emphasis on this. Is it reasonable to assume that as you grow up as a child, that you're subconsciously filing away what you're going to learn to use one of these days as a parent simply by observing what your parents are doing? In other words, does it mean a great deal to you as far as your future parenthood is concerned, the way your parents treat you?
No.
Sort of add that in as you answer.
Sure, very much so. I was thinking of that when Vivian was answering her question. Our parents serve as models for us, and they are about the only teachers we have at a very young age. We model their actions, the way they respond to our problems. If they get angry, how they handle their anger, how they communicate with each other. It helps us deal with problems as we get older. As the youngsters grow, there are other models, and the school becomes increasingly more important with the teachers taking over the role of the parent at a fairly young age.
Mark?
Well, in the 60s, we had all this fuss about the young people and the Vietnam War and things. And the critics of the young people said that they were raised too permissively. Here they were growing up and they were out smoking and drinking and living together, and boys and girls and all these bad things. The proponents of that say that by letting a young person grow up in an open, free atmosphere, they are more creative, they are less inhibited, they are not neurotic, you know, they're healthy-minded young people. The critics say it's too permissive and they do bad things. Is there a fine line, or better yet, is there a connection? If you raise a child openly and freely and let him do his own thing, will he grow up being a wild, uncontrolled person? And how do you define that, or how do you?
Well, I think it's very helpful to think in terms of a continuum, and that there is a continuum in raising children, the continuum between allowing complete freedom and very rigid authority. Dependent on the particular situation, a wise parent has to be able to find which end of that continuum is appropriate to that specific situation.
No general rule, in other words.
We really have to look at the situation involved. What you are relating to and talking about have been two different kinds of philosophies of child rearing, representing really extreme theoretical points of view. And they are really put forward in order to set forth a position. But we always have to come down to the particular parents, the particular child, the particular situation. And furthermore, different situations can be handled in different ways.
Well, Bruce, you work in a school system, right?
Yes.
In Haverford, I believe.
Yes.
Do you find when children with problems, let's say unmanageable kids are brought to you, you know, the kid who never shuts up, and then when you get to dealing with their parents, as I'm sure you do you find a connection between permissiveness at home and a child's ability to get along, be disciplined, and to get through school?
I believe very strongly that children need parameters. They have to have limits set for them. The word permissiveness is an unusual term because many parents will believe that if they respond to their children's childness and the behaviors that the child will display and allow them to display the typical child behavior, that they're being too permissive. I think that that is one end of this spectrum. Parents should set, in my opinion, limits and parameters, allow youngsters to have choices, but at the same time, limit the amount of choices, especially for the younger children, so that the child feels more secure and more comfortable in being able to make the appropriate and proper choice.
Hard to really pin anything down. We've gone ever how many minutes we've gone. We always keep saying, well, you could go this way, or if the child reacts this way, then you go that way. And there seems to be a very nebulous area here of how to be a good parent, how to handle a specific situation. I keep coming back to a few things that happened in my life that that make me very aware of one thing that continues to crop up, and that is, it seems like we never really consider what being a parent is all about until that being a parent is imminent. In other words, there isn't a real emphasis in our society on taking people who are of, let's say, you know, young adulthood age and teaching them to be parents. There's very little interest there, it would seem, until actually a woman is pregnant and knows that she's going to have a baby, or the baby's born, then the husband and wife realize they've got to deal with this situation. Do you agree or disagree, Vivian, that there's no emphasis on learning to be a parent before being a parent is imminent in your life?
I think there's probably a delayed interest. Young people are so full of their own immediate goals, their own immediate needs, that parenting, which really may not be that far in their future, is very far in their psychological future. So that perhaps what we need to do is say there are certain responsibilities that we have to insist that you begin to look at. That while you are very busy preparing for your own futures, one of your futures is parenting.
Probably.
Probably, because many young
Not
people are... That's right.
Maybe we're going to get to your case later on.
Well,
Bruce,
there are those of us who are still single and have really no particular interest in rearing a brood.
Is the place to do this in the school, the high school, the secondary school, where all of a sudden, along with algebra and whatever else, somebody says, now this is really a serious course on parenting, not some hokey thing that you're going to get a credit for if you just show up for class, but is that the place for the kind of emphasis that we're talking about to be made here?
I initially thought that having a particular course at a secondary curriculum would be advantageous. But I've given a lot of thought to it, and I believe that there has to be a continuum. It has to start in the elementary grades, with the children being aware as to how they communicate with each other, how they communicate with the people in their neighborhood. This is done in part, but I think that there should be a direction with the type of values that the children are absorbing both in their home and in the school, that they can be able to identify what they're learning and how that will affect them later on in life. I think it has to start at the elementary grades and then work its way through to the senior high schools.
Is there any effort like that being made now that you know about?
It depends on the school district. There are some that built it into their curriculum. Many have to depend on the community. And if the community will sanction that, then the school boards will go along with it.
So we're talking about dollars and cents here, too. Mark.
That's it.
We're talking about values in the community.
Well, years ago, there was a movie called The Bad Seed. That movie troubled me because the premise of it was that a little girl was born bad. She was just a bad kid. I would like to believe that children grow up the way we raise them. I'd like to believe that, I think, because that would make parents responsible, and I think that's a better society where parents feel that, you know, they do the right thing, the kids will be right. Is there really a causal relationship between what a parent does to a child and how the child grows up? In other words, is there a formula that could guarantee that a kid will be a decent student, come up to his abilities or her abilities, be an honest person? Or do you do what you do here and kid just comes out however he comes out? Is there a connection?
You're raising the very important question in the field of child psychology as to how much does what the child turns out to be depend on what the child brings into the world with him at birth, and how much depends on the kind of environment that they are exposed to. It really is not a question of either or anymore. It's a question of how much. And to every reaction, there is a counter-reaction. So we see that some children come into the world very placid, calm infants. Others are a little jerky, a little jumpy. And we must recognize that the calm, placid kind of child may have a calm, placid kind of parent, or may have a nervous type of parent, but the kind of child they are also affects the parent's reaction to them. And so here starts a cycle of child-parent interaction.
But the specific question I want to ask is, if I had a child and if I said, boy, I'd really like this kid to grow up and make $1 million and be a dynamic, successful, you know, whatever he wanted to be, but something very successful, maybe a president of the United States. Is there something like the fellow who put his daughter in the crib, Skinner, I guess was his name, raised her in this very controlled environment, and she grew up to be a strange person, I guess, but they claim she's a genius. I'm not quite sure how that came out, but can you do something to make that happen? In other words, how do you get a kid to get great grades, to work hard and love school? Can you do that?
I think that there are certain values that the parents can have that would help raise the child towards that direction. I don't think that there's a specific formula.
The reason I ask specifically is because I've seen cases where a dynamic, hard-working father has a dynamic, hard-working son. I've seen the exact opposite, where a dynamic, hard-working father has a bum son. They both wanted their sons to work hard, but in one case, the kid sort of said, well, the heck with you, I'm not going to compete with the old man, became a bum, or a non-achiever, an underachiever. In other cases, he competed with the father, and the classic Oedipus case, and he became, you know, a dynamo like his father.
Goes back to that interaction thing you were talking about, where there's so many things bouncing off.
Yeah.
By the time you go through parents, then into the school system with the teachers and everybody else that's affecting you, then your peers and all sorts of
The
pressures.
Rockefellers.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen next? Well, look at the first family. The Carters. You got one that's president, the other guy's drinking beer in a service station somewhere, the other's an evangelist, and you know, the mother's running off to India at 80 years old and helping folks out in the mountains. It's hard to put any clamp on that family to say, now here is a real nuclear family, and here's how they all came out. Let me ask you one quick question in this area. Boy, there's so many things running around in my mind to ask. Do you feel that there is a basic problem in that still, in this day and age, notwithstanding all the emphasis on family planning, that there are a lot of kids born to parents who really don't care that much about having the kids? And that's got to set up some real problems right off the bat, doesn't it? Bruce?
Jim, I'm thinking it's a very difficult question to answer. I'm sure that there are children born to parents who do not want to have children. That's a very simple. The number of cases that I have been involved with have given me the indication that most of the parents have wanted to have the children and care very much about the children. But because they may not have the correct techniques, because of problems that had developed in their lives after the youngster was born, that difficulties were initiated, and the parents had problems interacting with the child, with their children. So I think that, you know, I'm sure that there are parents who have children that they didn't want. However, some of the parents that I've spoken to who have admitted that to me also have children that they love, that they care for, and even though they may not have been planned, are still taken care of very adequately.
There was a study recently, wasn't there, of some PhD candidate someplace did a study showing that unwanted children grew up to be criminals and other kinds of social rejects because that unwantedness came from their parents, that feeling of unwanted. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I think we have to look at why the unwantedness, and many times we have to look at the situation of the parent the mother, for example, who finds herself pregnant, or the young couple who finds that they're going to have a child. Many times there's an economic squeeze. It may be another child added to a list of children. There may be illness in the family. There are impacting factors from the outside environment that sometimes affect the person in terms of their question to themselves, be it conscious or unconscious: am I going to make a good parent? Sometimes it's this kind of question and the insecurity about whether or not they themselves have the goods to make a good parent, or have the financial backing to give children what they need today, that causes parents to almost turn defensively in the other direction. So there are many, many factors that we need to think about. Generally speaking, I agree with Bruce. Most parents really want to be good parents and do the best job they possibly can.
Now, Jim, when you were doing the series last week, and I watched it, of course, you knew more about it because you were on it and in it, but all those questions about what you do in different situations, one answer never showed up.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking now, I'm very serious about this. None of the answers ever offered was, do what I told you to do because I own this house and I am your father or your mother and I'm the boss, and you're going to go through life and find a lot of people telling you things to do you don't want to do, and do it. Is that ever a valid answer?
No, if I could pick that up, but I feel pretty
Yes, you
strongly
can,
about
because
that.
I'm going to disagree with you.
A little antagonism here. Okay.
Little age gap, maybe, generation thing.
Maybe.
I don't think that that is the most valid way of handling a situation. I think that that avoids dealing with the conflict and instead creates a power play between the parent and the child.
Yeah, but isn't there a lot of that in life? And the reason I ask the question is, it seems to me that if parents do their job right, they'll prepare you to go through life. Now, you get out in the world, I've been in the Army and other places, where more or less somebody says, hey, here's a job I want done, and if you do it, we'll pay you, and if you don't do it, get out. You know, they may not be that blunt, but that's the way life goes. Why not do it to a kid and let him know that there are times when authority...
I mentioned previously that I think that the parents have to present themselves as the authority figures, and they have to be able to set parameters and limit the amount of choices that especially youngsters have. Youngsters have to be given choices. I think that will allow them to learn responsibility in their own lives. But the final word should be the parents. I think it's very plain that if the parent allows the child to make too many choices, to make too many decisions without the control and without the parental advice, that you're going to find many youngsters feeling very confused, very anxious, and making incorrect choices.
But Doctor, you do think there are times when you might just say, I'm the boss, and...
I agree with Bruce that it's not the responsive choice. But I do believe that at a certain point, a child needs the firmness, which does reflect certain realities of the life that they are going to lead, that they do not always have a choice, that they cannot always even have a reasoned argument. As parents, we try to give our children a reasoned argument as many times as we can. But there are certain times when perhaps the child is really not developmentally at the point where he can understand why the parent takes a specific point of view. And there will be times in life when the individual will not be able to understand why there is a specific posture taken by a specific person, organization, etc. So that I myself feel that on occasion a child does need to come to grips with the fact that maybe they don't understand why the answer is no.
I think that everything that we've said here so far is reflective of the fact that that people openly discuss this subject on television, and we continually come up with a myriad number of answers for each situation. In other words, we haven't said anything today that we can really pin anything down, because it still depends on the interaction between different human beings from any number of different directions. Where it seems that when I was growing up, and I'm sure when Mark was growing up too, and maybe y'all too, it seemed to be a rather simplistic thing. I'm backing into corporal punishment here. Because there was a time in a very vivid way that if I had to think of one thing that bespoke my childhood, there was the consistent and ever-present threat, if you want to use that word, that if I got out of line, I was going to pay a physical price for it. Where do we stand today on that subject, Bruce?
I think that there have been many pros and cons regarding physical punishment. Most of the statistics indicate that physical punishment is not effective. It will take care of a situation immediately, but the long-term effects will not be lasting. And the best way to handle a situation is to avoid the physical confrontation, which will usually result in the youngster feeling resentful and hostile, and without being able to problem solve the situation correctly.
What do you think, Vivian?
Certainly, once again, I concur with what Bruce has contributed. I feel additionally that it's very important to always understand what does the behavior mean. And I look at the parents' behavior in this particular instance, and I would say to you, Jim, as you think back on your father's actions, did
it was
they,
my mother.
your mother's actions,
Yeah.
did they convey to you that they were concerned about you, and that this was their way of showing their concern? Now, certainly, we hope to help parents be able to find other means so that physical punishment is, again, not the method of choice. I think that when parents do get across to the children that they love the children, that children really are prominent in their concerns, both time-wise, thought-wise, where they feel the tender, loving care, that on occasion, a parent might be at the point where they really cannot handle themselves in any other way. Now, I'm not talking about punishment where the child is really harmed,
Right.
but a little pat on the rear end, or sometimes even something a little stronger, provided that it carries the message. Certainly afterwards, talking about it.
Let me go to the
is
other
very
end of the
helpful.
spectrum real quick, because I had a thought that's very important to me, because again, it goes back to the way I was raised, and something that we really didn't cover in this whole series last week. Is it really a vital thing, and is it an important thing for parents to freely exhibit emotional love in front of their kids? In other words, should husbands and wives freely hug each other and kiss each other and tell each other they love each other before their kids all the time, very early on and right on through the adolescent period, to exhibit that there is a relationship there that has a mystery to it and has something more to it than the child can really be exposed to until he starts really reading books? And you follow what I mean? And to my way of thinking, maybe that would balance some of the outbursts that I received when I was a kid, and there weren't anything wrong with them, because I think I'm a wonderful person, but but I didn't see a whole lot of my folks exhibiting real love for each other. Is that important? I'm not trying to knock my folks either. They were marvelous people, but
I would never recommend that parents constantly display that type of emotion if they weren't comfortable with it. I think they have to deal honestly with each other. If the parents are going to act as effective models for their children, it's important for them to appropriately show affection to each other, as well as appropriately show anger. So at either end of the spectrum, whether it's a loving relationship or it's an angry relationship, I think it has to be out in the open and has to be dealt with honestly.
and it's going to have an effect on the kids. You believe that, don't you?
Yes, I believe that it would certainly act as a model. The youngsters would then learn that it's okay, it's fine to be able to display their affections, as well as being able to display their anger.
In general, excuse me, but in general, could you say that if you have a happy, open family where there's a lot of love and a lot of affection and care, that the kids will grow up sort of that way? And conversely, if you have a home that's full of strife, where things aren't happy, maybe it's because of economics, whatever number of reasons that a home has problems, that the children will grow up with problems. There's a connection there, isn't there?
Well, I think in our search for is there something definite we can say about child rearing, that we certainly can say that a home that's filled with love and affection is an enormous plus. And that in addition to showing affection toward one another, husband and wife, the freedom to show that kind of affection toward their children, so that it's not mom and dad who love each other, but the kids are another category. But it's mom and dad and the kids who love each other, argue with each other, talk with each other, joke with each other, and that essentially this sets a scene for a happy growing up period and a modeling period for the future. I think particularly at this particular moment when there are so many broken homes, and increasingly children are exposed to the kinds of arguments and strife that do occur prior to the breakup, that it's very important for children in intact homes to be reassured by seeing a kind of affection between parents. And it's very important if they have guests who are children perhaps of parents who have split, so that these children who have come from broken homes can see that it is not universal, that there are opportunities for successful kind of family life and rearing.
Let me hit you with that old wives' tale that Mark will be familiar with, I'm sure, too, that if you don't get it made with your kids as far as setting down the proper kind of rules, regulations, guidance, love, affection, and all these other inputs, if you don't get that pretty well squared away by the time they're 6 years old or 7 years old, then you've really begun to tread on dangerous ground, because from that time on they're exposed to the schools and their own peers and all the rest of those other pressures that become involved. So those first few years, are they as critical as we're led to believe they are?
Yeah, I believe that there are certain critical periods in a youngster's life, and if they have a loving, wonderful relationship, especially early in their lives, that will be very meaningful. However, I think that they're going to have to be constantly exposed to the value system of the family, and it's an ongoing process. So I wouldn't say that at the age of 6 or 7 or whatever that it should stop. It's an ongoing process.
Hopefully it won't stop. I just thought you may have made a big mistake if you don't get a lot of stuff done by the time they're 6 or 7.
Get it when it's early. We're almost out of time. We are out of time. One quick question. Is there one book people should read, or one place they should go, or one something that young parents should do to try to get a good start? Is there a 10-second quick answer?
Oh, I'd encourage them to read a variety of different books so that they get a whole spectrum of opinions, so that they can really work with the one that feels the best to them and that works best for them.
Thank you both for
We're
coming.
going to be talking about how to deal with handling the excitement that children go through during the holiday season, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Hanukkah, the excitement that comes with that, and sometimes the disappointment too when there's gift giving and maybe they don't get what they want. His name is Dr. Bruce Miller, and we welcome him to AM Philadelphia. It's good that you're here, Bruce.
Good morning, Dave.
You know, when I was reading about this yesterday, going over some of the material, I was trying to think of myself, thinking back when I was a youngster, if there were times when I was disappointed. I have no great memories of really being disappointed over things. Is that a genuine problem that we have to deal with today?
I was wondering how you were feeling when you were trying to wind up the kangaroo and have it jump so that it landed on its feet, and whether you were feeling disappointed at that time.
I was very disappointed, but I got it to do one complete jump, so I felt better.
There are a lot of children who do feel some disappointment. Before coming on today, I spoke to many of the students that I see in therapy, and many of them did not report any disappointment. It seemed as though they were really caught up in the spirit of Christmas and the spirit of giving and receiving, and that was the overriding theme. Some, however, were disappointed, and I discovered that the disappointment came as a result of two major reasons. One was that the gifts seemed to have been a replacement of the love, and the students and the children really wanted their parents to be more involved with them, so that the better the interaction was between the children and their parents, the less important the gifts became.
So that just giving children a gift or showering them with a lot of gifts is probably what the child is not looking for.
Well, I'll give you an example. I spoke the other day to a youngster who was 12, whose father is an executive, father travels a great deal, and he knew that he was going to be getting a lot of nice gifts. And I spoke to him, and he didn't seem to have a lot of an excitement, didn't seem to be very animated. And I asked him what was the problem, what did he really want? He said he was thrilled about the gifts. He was looking forward to receiving them and looking forward to spending the time with the holiday. But he really wished that his father would spend more time at home and not travel as much. If his father spent more time at home and the parents were together more frequently, and that the family was more cohesive, that would be very important for him. I wasn't taking away from the gifts. He was excited about them. But I had a feeling that the excitement of the gifts was not going to last as long as the pleasure would have been if the family, or if he perceived the family to be more cohesive.
Let's talk a little bit about the confusion, I call it confusion, that could happen in a household on Christmas morning with the opening of the gifts and the excitement, and even the night before when children are so hyper. Are there some things that we should be aware of to try and control that so that they still have a good time?
Sure. It's difficult to talk about control because if I talk specifically about control, what will happen is that many viewers may believe that it's important to put as much structure as possible. And I think that any holiday season, especially this one, should be a holiday season for the children to enjoy and for there not to be as much rigidity.
All right, what about, let me give you an example then. What about opening of the gifts? Oftentimes, some will want to open Christmas Eve, and sometimes the parents will say, well, wait till the morning. What about that kind of a thing, dealing with that?
The most important thing is for the parents to really communicate effectively before the holiday. For the parents to discuss with each other what their image is of that evening and of the day after, so that the two of them become very much connected and that they can give consistent messages to the children. If the parents decide that they want to open up the gifts that evening, Christmas Eve, or wait until Christmas morning, they should decide that ahead of time. And they should also decide how they're going to interact with the children when they open up the gifts. Are both parents going to be there? Is one parent going to be busy in the kitchen and one father is going to be busy with family or relatives? I think it's important that the parents join together and be with the children when the gifts are open, and that there is a certain amount of structure so the children know where to play with the toys, where to put the gift wrappings, and it doesn't have to be a very structured situation so the children don't have any freedom to enjoy themselves, but they should be given some parameters so that it's not a chaotic situation.
All right, just some basic rules, right?
Right.
All right, let us take a call from a viewer. Good morning, you're on AM Philadelphia. Go ahead.
Hi. I have a little girl who will be 9 years old in February, and most of her friends don't believe in Santa Claus anymore. But she does because I told her there was. How do I tell her that there is none without, being
Oh, that's a toughie. I've gone through that 3 times. Go ahead.
I expected that question, and I had asked many friends and relatives what they did. And I think it varies from family to family. However, I don't think it's a wise idea to lie to the child. It may be best to throw the question back to the child and to see what they really want to believe in. So you could say to the child, well, what do you believe? Do you really think there's a Santa Claus? Do you want to believe there's a Santa Claus? And if you can see in the child's face that they really want to believe that, I would go along with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if the child says, geez, I don't think that there's a Santa Claus and there isn't any, throw it back, ask, and if they persist and think that it isn't, I think that by the age of, you say 9?
Right.
Okay, I don't think that at that particular point it would be necessary to continue the farce.
Mm-hmm. You can always, I guess, get an indication whether the child really wants to go on continuing believing or they've come to a certain point. It's a fine line, though, and it was an emotional one for us to go through with our children because they're older now. And when you do tell them, there's a disappointment to as a parent, because I miss putting out the cookies and leaving the carrot and all of that stuff at night, and then having to take care of it later on in the evening.
Disappointment is a reality. All children have to face disappointment in life, and I don't think that the parents have to or should protect their children from all disappointments. And especially at this holiday season, I believe that many parents want to go out of their way to protect the children from feeling any disappointment or any unhappiness. That's not realistic.
Yeah, disappointment is part of everyday living. You have to deal with it. Well, good luck in telling your daughter, all right? And difficult situation. Let's take another call. Good morning. You're on AM Philadelphia. Go ahead.
Hi, I'd like to know, is it a bad idea to take a 4-year-old child away from their home on Christmas morning?
Can you explain a little bit more? To take them away from the home and take them where?
To visit relatives, away from their toys and, their new things that they've just...
Oh, after they've opened the gifts and so forth?
Yes.
And then go and visit some people?
Yeah. it would be important to clarify with the children beforehand what the family's value system is. So, for instance, a day or two beforehand, I think it would be important for the parents to talk to the child in we terms. On this holiday, the family celebrates it with the rest of the family. We go together. This is a time for all of us to be cohesive, and we're going to be traveling. We know you would like to stay home and play with the toys and to relax. However, we believe that it's important to visit the family and to be together.
That might be a little bit difficult to get across to a 4-year-old. I don't know. Are you going to try that?
Yes, I suppose.
Have you tried anything in the past?
No, not really. Basically just, you know, letting the kids stay home for a while in the afternoon and then taking them to relatives at night.
There should be a time when the child is at home playing with the toys and for the parents to be there and interact together. I think that time should be given. And it may be difficult for a 4-year-old to delay that and wait for the afternoon. If it's possible to even wake up a half an hour earlier and to interact with the child and let them get a feel for what their toys are, I think that would probably be preferable. But then to go back and let them know that it's important for the family to believe that they all have to work together and to visit the other relatives. But some time should be given.
That's a good idea. I think getting up earlier and making some special time for them to play with it, and then say,
Sure.
we'll get back to this later on tonight.
Maybe tough setting that alarm clock a half an hour earlier
Yeah.
after being up late at night, but giving the child as much attention and satiate them with attention and love and being together in that morning, that 15 minutes, extra 15 minutes or half hour may pay off.
I still want to stay with the train set. You know, we'll see the relatives tomorrow or something.
That's right.
All right, let's take another call. Good morning. You're on AM Philadelphia. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to know, how do you deal with a child when the parents are separated, but she wants to be with both parents on Christmas morning?
Yeah, very common problem. How old is the child?
7.
7, it's not too young for the 7-year-old to have to be part of the decision making. So I think that both you and if it's you and your ex-husband should make some decisions ahead of time as to what the two of you feel comfortable with. And if the two of you are consistent, the 7-year-old would probably go along with what she or he believes to be fair. So I think there's several steps. One is that the two of you plan ahead of time as to what the two of you are comfortable with, and plan the day and structure it in a way that the 7-year-old feels comfortable. Most 7-year-olds have a very good sense of fairness, and if they're with a parent for part of the time or for one day and then have to go to the other parent for the other day, most of them will adjust very well. The problem usually lies with the parents, not with the children. Children adjust much more easily than the parents do.
Have you and your ex come up with a plan? Do you have an idea?
Well, we're going to let her go over to his house for Christmas, but she feels very guilty about leaving me home alone. And I feel bad about that because I don't know how to treat that.
Okay. Has she expressed to you that she feels guilty?
Yes, she's constantly saying, well, Mom, I'm going to call you and, you know, see what you're doing and things like that, and I don't know what to say to her.
Okay. I would really assure her as much as possible that you are feeling comfortable, that you need some time to be alone, you need some time to settle down, and that you want her to be very happy. So the more comfortable she knows you are and the more self-assured she feels you are, the more relaxed she'll be when she visits with her father.
All right.
Give her some confidence, some assurance, even though you may be hurting inside yourself, I guess. That's the way to handle it.
Parents are the
Giving.
ones that hurt a great deal, and sometimes the children pick that up from the parents.
Okay, thank you very much. We thank all of our callers this morning. We thank Dr. Bruce Miller for being with us. Some good advice in dealing with the young people around this holiday season. We all must be aware of that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All
Merry
right.
Christmas to you.
Thank you very much, and happy Hanukkah to you. It's a little bit late, but I'm there. All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about holiday safety. I'm sure many of us have a tree and how to decorate it and so forth, and what to be careful of. We'll tell you about that when we come right back.